everyone, and welcome to our session, The Future of Security-Focused AI. Hi, I'm Emily, and I'm the Senior Manager for Events here at GovLoop. And today I have the added pleasure of also being your moderator. So thanks so much for joining me on today's adventure. And a special thank you to our sponsors at Veeam for helping us put on this session today. So let's get right into it because government teams are handling growing volumes of data, increasingly complex systems, and a widening threat landscape, all while cloud adoption continues to raise the bar for security. So that's a lot to handle. Our experts today are going to break down what modern cloud backup and recovery look like and how security-focused AI is helping agencies stay ahead of these threats and recover a little bit faster. But before we get to all of that good stuff, we do have some housekeeping items to go over. If you haven't already checked them out, there is a resources tab available for you along the bottom panel of this console. That's where you can find some extra learning opportunities as well as a little bit more about our speakers. So make sure you check that out. If you need access to that closed captioning feature, just look for that show captions icon along the bottom panel as well. And that's where you'll find that added accessibility. Now, we hope you don't have any technical difficulties, but they can and do happen. And if they do, send us a message through that Q&A tab and my colleague Maddie will get you all sorted out. You can use that same tab to submit questions to our speakers, and we want your questions. That's why we're here today. So put them in early and often. You can also chat with your fellow attendees using that chat button. And last but certainly not least, we are recording this session. So check your inboxes tomorrow because we'll email you a link so you can watch the entire thing again, or maybe send it along to one of your colleagues. All right, with all of that housekeeping out of the way, I want to introduce you to today's speakers. Joining us, we have Vishal Chaudhry, who is the Chief Data Officer for Washington State Healthcare Authority. We have Jennifer Franks, who's the Director for the Center for Enhanced Cybersecurity at the Government Accountability Office. And we have Jeff Reichard, who is the Vice President for Solutions Strategy at Veeam. Thank you three so much for being with us today. And Jennifer, I'm going to start things off with you here because I think when you think about the future of security-focused AI, that's a big topic. What's the first big shift you've seen across government? Is it the data, the systems, the threats? I don't want to put words in your mouth so you can take it however you want, but I'm curious what you're seeing as evolving first here.
Good question, and I am not shocked you started with me. So, what we're seeing across the government is that all three really, the data, the systems, and the threats are evolving. And they're evolving at a pace that is almost unattainable to keep up with every single day. And the biggest shift in how it's really how they're converging, like how we're merging the processes together. And data is expanding rapidly, as you know, and systems are just more distributed across our cloud environments as well as our hybrid environments because we do still have on-prem networks. And threats are just becoming more adaptive. So, from the GAO perspective and our oversight work, we're consistently finding that agencies struggle with the visibility across these three environments,
Mhm.
especially as data moves between our systems. And many of our reviews have really highlighted the gaps in, for example, continuous monitoring and incomplete asset visibility. And as we know, as we've been talking about for some years, security is no longer about just protecting your resources or your network at the perimeter level. It's really about understanding the full context of your users, your data, and your systems in real time. So that is why I really think it's all three in one.
Yeah. All right, Vishal, she went for the three part there. Where do you see some of the shifts happening in your organization as it pertains to this security focused AI? Are you seeing it from all three angles as well, or is there one we're missing, one that's coming in stronger than the others, perhaps?
I think Jennifer captured it in a much better manner than I would ever be able to say. And I'm just, I can tell people I'm just the data guy. You know, but that said, I hate to put it that way, but it's all about the data,
Hmm.
right? I mean, what we're trying to secure, yes, we're trying to secure our networks and technologies, but at the end of the day, yes, there are some actors whose target is actually the network itself. But most of what we deal with in terms of volume of threat actors or volume of threats coming in, it's really data pilferation, if I would, if you can put it that way. Um, and so yes, to everything that Jennifer said, and across different government sectors, um, I work in healthcare. We
Hmm.
have some of the most sensitive data for clients and individuals and residents of the state, um, and data about some of the most vulnerable populations in the state, right? So the responsibility um, from from a state government perspective, at least from my agency's perspective, is fairly uh, expanded, if you will, than if we were just looking at, maybe I'm a marketing company and I'm just dealing with marketing data. Yes, it's customer data, it's mostly contact information. Suddenly you get into highly sensitive information, and that just changes the color of the conversation, right? Um, so it's not just whether there is a risk, it's what's the gradation of that risk,
Yeah.
and how do we then devise layered strategies, if you will, to address the different gradations of the risk. So
That makes sense. All right, Jeff, you're in the hardest position here to go for our opening question because you've already heard the salvos here from Jennifer and Vishal. But obviously, you're coming at this conversation from a different perspective. You're working with government partners. What shifts have you seen in your relationship with them as they go down this secure AI path?
Well, the comments that have already been made are spot on. I will echo something that Jennifer mentioned. She talked about the fact that every environment has hybrid cloud set up at this point. What that means is that the attack surface is so much larger than it was years ago when I first began working with federal and state and local governments, and most things were in data centers. Now we have not only systems, but critical data and sensitive data that is also living up in the cloud. One of the areas I've seen agencies struggle is to be able to apply the same security controls and the same data protection mechanisms to cloud resources that they already are very used to using and have very mature levels of on-prem. So the attack surface is a threat. Your question also talked about the threats themselves.
Mhm.
AI has really driven an increase in the sophistication and the number of attacks that are happening as well. Social engineering is much easier for threat actors than it used to be because of AI. Even the ability to compromise systems without malware, so in a way that's very difficult to detect, is being driven by AI. I think probably a lot of us saw there was a news story about the NYU School of Engineering last summer where they did an attack that the news sources called it ransomware 3.0, a completely AI driven zero malware ransomware attack proof of concept from beginning to end. So that's really driving a lot of changes. And just the speed. I think we're going to see a lot of folks having to adopt real time AI integrated threat detection and security just because the speed of the exploits and attacks is increasing so much.
Yeah. I didn't mention it at the top of the hour, but we are offering one CPE or continuing professional education credit for attending today's session. And to get that credit, you do need to take the three polls and stick around for the entire session. So I've got the first poll up right now, and we're for this one looking at, is your agency focused on AI security? And I think some of our panelists might hope the answer's going in one direction, but we'll wait to see what the results are going to be here. But while you take that poll, one of the things that I sometimes struggle with, and Jennifer, I'll start back with you on this one, is that AI is this hot topic. It's something that every government agency is talking about in some way, shape, or form. It's something my grandma's even talking about. So we know that AI has really kind of touched the landscape in a bunch of different ways. But in a government context, where are you seeing realistic ways that agencies can really start benefiting perhaps from the technology without kind of getting overwhelmed and the possibilities and maybe some of the challenges?
That's a good question, and you're so right. AI is it's touching everything we do every single day. My mother was just talking about how she called to get an appointment with the doctor, and you usually are pressing one or two or
Mhm.
something, but immediately you're met with that AI who
Mhm.
is managing that process for you now. So having to really shift the way we're doing business and the way we're thinking is something that is very realistic. And the most realistic way for agencies to start benefiting from AI is to honestly focus on a small number of high value use cases tied to their greatest mission outcomes. You will fail if you take on too much at
Yeah.
once. You will fail if you do not look at the scope of your environment and consider your most mission critical areas that could use some of those advanced automated processes. And what it is we've seen thus far in our oversight work at GAO is that most of the agencies are often faced with challenges regarding, like he said earlier, the data quality and the governance around managing that data, even before introducing AI into the conversation. And what we're hoping is that agencies are going to eventually start making more progress with their targeted applications, like improving data analyses or even enhancing their threat detection capabilities while strengthening their data foundation. So, yeah, it ends and begins with data. And it's going to be less about scaling AI broadly and really more about applying it wherever we can deliver it across our universe to our agencies so that we can measure the value and properly govern the AI.
Hmm. That makes sense. Vishal, one of the things you started out talking about here was the data of it all, and that you're our data guy on today's session. Where do you see agencies potentially benefiting from AI from your purview in the data shop?
Yeah, I'm going to build on what Jennifer mentioned. Um, so at the Washington State Healthcare Authority, we established our AI ethics committee 3 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, the the intent of that committee is to govern the use of AI, but from an ethical perspective, right? It's not about controlling the use. It is about recognizing the importance of this technology and how it could impact different parts of the agency's functions and how we support and provide services to the clients, the risk and sensitivity associated with each of those different areas, and then take that into context while evaluating the use of different AI tools and proposals within that space, right? Um, the question that we wrestle with every single time something comes up for discussion is this the right thing to do?
Yeah.
I guess that's the first and most important question. And
Hmm.
then we get to, if this is the right thing to do, what's the right way to do it?
Hmm.
Right? And that brings technologists into the play, that brings other business leaders into play, our comms folks come into play. How do we make sure all of those key considerations around transparency, fairness, trustworthiness, all of those come into play, and they're part of our ethics framework. So we approach it in that way.
Hmm.
You know, and I would challenge any organization if they would look at our framework. It's on our website, it's public. And anybody, if they would like say, hey, this part doesn't apply to me.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be interesting to hear that. Like, some of these are just motherhood and apple pie statements to say, yeah, of course, we want to make sure that the client interests are protected. We want to make sure that it's transparent when a non-human entity is making a decision for something. At the very least, we should know that that is happening, right? And so I think that keeping that in the context, especially in the government context, because we exist to serve the residents of the state. That is the primary purpose of our existence. We do a lot of things, a lot of good things, right? But that is the primary purpose. So we need to keep that core, like Jennifer mentioned, always in front of us.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. All right, Jeff, I want to take my next question for you in a slightly different direction because we've talked now about perhaps some of the realities associated with securing AI. And obviously, a big part of that comes from the cloud because the cloud is in large part supporting AI. So cloud adoption, as you all have referenced, has really matured quite a bit. How has that changed the way that you've seen agencies think about things around backup, recovery, and resilience as compared to a few years ago, now that AI is obviously part of this conversation as well?
Those things have changed enormously. Those conversations are not the same as they were even a couple of years ago. I have been doing compliance and data protection for long enough that I can remember it being standard for a lot of companies, especially ones not in regulated industries and government agencies, to do their annual DR exercise where they would get tapes and go to an offsite data center, maybe a third-party data center. And those exercises would inevitably fail to some extent or another because applications had changed or things had not been protected that needed to be protected. We are so far past that now with the ubiquity of cloud resources, with the adoption of cloud-based applications themselves like Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace or all of that. What I see agencies desiring now and really requiring now is backups that go to the cloud and the ability to recover immediately or near immediately to the cloud in an automated fashion. That is something that was really accelerated by COVID back in 2020, and it has just continued since then. So that's a huge difference. The desire for rapid recovery and without having to have data centers sitting on standby on-prem to do it in. Another big change, and this has been driven by the ransomware epidemic, which we all know has really affected public sector, state and local governments, higher ed, all those entities a lot, is the desire for the data protection to be ransomware resistant. You need something that Jennifer mentioned, zero trust frameworks and defense in depth. And I think that we all expect now that if you're going to protect data, it's going to be protected to the cloud and it's got to be resistant, even if a threat actor compromises admin credentials and gets access to that, it can't be deleted. So those are the two biggest changes around data protection that I typically see talking with agencies.
Yeah. Building on that, Vishal, one, we got the results from the poll, and our poll asked, is your agency focused on AI security? 39 folks said yes, so that's great news. We're happy with those 39. Another probably, I can't do quick math, but about 30 or so are in that somewhat or evolving. 3 said no, that seems somewhat troubling. And a few folks didn't know as well. I think what this poll highlights to me is just how quickly this evolving landscape is shifting and that priorities around security are changing as well. And one of the challenges that often pops up is data sprawl, right? We've got so much data coming in. It's coming in from all of these different entities, whether they are human-based or bot-based or however. What practical challenges does this data sprawl create for keeping things secure and backed up and recoverable in some sense?
You want to list all the challenges?
If you could, from top to bottom. Well, if we should we just take a nap here all together?
I'll just, maybe I'll reframe the question if you would allow me that privilege.
Yes, of course.
What do we do about the challenges that
Yeah.
that we now face with the data sprawl. Because it's, back in the day, I will date myself. Back in the day, we used to actually say, no, you will use only certain set of shared folders to keep stuff and nowhere else. And we could actually contain that. Or we could, limit server space for people and where you could store the data and what type of data, and we could put controls on it. We're in a space now where it's a good thing that technology and the use of data infrastructure is so democratized. It is brilliant. It is great for the overall, progress in society. That's a really good thing. And it brings challenges that did not exist a few years ago. Right? Now, what do we do with those challenges? How do we keep everything secure, backed up, and recoverable? Like you said, the first thing is awareness. Step one is awareness. Awareness, awareness, awareness. Help people understand what they're getting into before they get into it. Give them an off-ramp when they find that they're in a pickle. Are the off-ramps clear? Are they clearly articulated? Are they blameless? That is something that, we in the healthcare industry, in the hospital industry, we talk about just culture a lot. It's the process, not the person. We need to reinforce some of those core, I would say, process and structural principles in order to empower the folks who are dealing with this daily. Like my boss tells me I got to do this work, and the only way I can do it is by making 2 copies of the thing that's over there. That Vishal said probably not a good idea, but I got to do it because I have a report due tomorrow, so I'm going to do it anyway. Those things happen on a daily basis. And there's really no good way to put a control on it without impeding business growth and service delivery, right? So how do we then support that in a way that maintains security? And from my perspective, it's not just security, it's also the integrity of the data. The bigger the data sprawl, the more copies of information that exist, the further you get away from the truth. Drift is very real in the space of, we talk about drift in terms of AI now, but in terms of data and the source of truth, the drift with every copy that's created is very real. It's very tangible, and pretty soon we get into situations where data are not trustworthy, reports are not trustworthy. You don't trust information coming out because somebody else can put something on and say, well, you're saying this, but I'm seeing this. Right. So it becomes a topic for us more from an infrastructure and a human support perspective, in addition to the technological investments that we need to make, because some of those supports are technological in nature.
Yeah.
Right. And we need to not just prevent, we also need to have that detection and support when something does go wrong. And the person in it realizes that, oops, there's an issue here. Okay, now what do we do? So, yeah.
Yeah. Jeff, I see you nodding your head along here. Anything you would like to add on to this data sprawl conversation?
It's an excellent point. I already mentioned the attack surface issue with data sprawl across hybrid, but Vishal's point about the drift in being able to trust the data that you've got once things start sprawling out, and I've got multiple potential sources, is also very valid. It's interesting, both Jennifer and for obvious reasons, Vishal have brought up the healthcare context of AI usage, especially if we have situations where we're going to have systems making decisions, getting involved in diagnosis, getting involved in anything in the healthcare area, then being able actually to trust that data and know what's canonical and what's not, and who may have had access to it and who might have changed it, becomes more important than ever. And more difficult than ever because of data sprawl. So it's a very lively topic. I'm actually, I didn't put this in the chat, but I'm actually coming to everyone today from San Francisco, where I've been at the RSAC conference all week. And there is nonstop discussion about verifying the trustworthiness of data and about the utility of AI in security, both from the attack standpoint and the defense standpoint here this week.
That. All right. So Jennifer, Jeff and Vishal just mentioned trust, and I want to get your take on this too, because we hear a lot about the AI tools, but obviously trust in government decision making is a huge and very critical element. What tends to make agency hesitant about relying on AI for things like threat detection or restoration because of that trust piece?
So good question, and you're right. Trust is a major factor. Um, we really, and I put something in the chat about understanding how decisions are made. And this goes into that trust factor, especially in high risk areas like threat detection or incident recovery. And from our oversight perspective across the government, what we've been seeing, of the poll popped up for me.
Oh, so sorry.
And then I want to read it because I want to see the answers. But what we've been seeing is that agencies often struggle with data governance and transparency and accountability. So as Vishal and Jeff both have noted, these areas were a limitation across our organizations before AI was even introduced.
Hmm.
And our work on federal AI use cases thus far has really highlighted our risk related to the data quality and some of the biases and ethical responsibilities for that data, and even understanding the lack of clear guidance and governance structures. And trust is centered and built around when the agencies can really explain how these critical decisions are being made, and then ensure to the users, to their population, that AI is there to support but not replace that human judgment.
Yeah. I think that is so critically important. And like Jennifer mentioned, the poll did pop up her mid answer there. So apologies for that. But we do have our second poll going right now. So you can take that now. Um, and we are rapidly going through this training. We are more than halfway through. So I want, and Jeff, I'm going to start with this one for you. I want to shift now. We've talked about some of the challenges, and Vishal noted, and you all agreed that there are a plenty of challenges associated here. I want to spend the back half talking about maybe some ways, lessons learned, best practices, things like that. So, as we are looking at ways that agencies have been able to effectively, to whatever extent possible, kind of secure some of their AI uses. Where are you seeing AI make some impacts today as it comes to the threat reality? Are you seeing it catch things sooner, restoring systems, anything in that regard that you want to touch on?
Sure, absolutely. So in the broader context, obviously, and Jennifer mentioned things like getting an appointment at a doctor and
Mhm.
things like that. The low-hanging fruit for a lot of agency systems has been interaction with stakeholders, things like customer support, knowledge bases, chatbots, all that sort of thing. In the security context specifically, what we see folks doing is adopting Copilot-like agents for log analysis and looking at indicators of compromise so that analysts can arrive at more rapid decisions. And AI is very, very good at that because AI can process information more quickly, and point you directly to the things that you maybe should be looking at as an analyst. So it's really reducing mean time to detect and respond to incidents. Department of Homeland Security has been writing about this for the past couple of years from CISA. It's helping a lot. The sort of downside of that is that it's making the bad guy's job easier too. So we need to get better and faster at spotting these things, because the bad guys' dwell time is going way down before attacks can be set off. And it's largely because the tooling and the ability to move and to identify data to be stolen, to Vishal's point earlier, and successfully do it, is getting a lot more sophisticated. Um, the other thing that we are seeing is that data loss prevention tooling, looking at things like user behavior analytics, possible insider threats, that sort of thing, is becoming much more sophisticated because of the use of AI. And that's something that I've frankly heard a lot about this week at the RSAC conference, but it's something that we're seeing make a practical difference for agencies too.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. All right, I'm going to give our poll another couple seconds. But spoiler alert, the answers are all 11 right now. All answers have 11 in them. Vishal, where are you seeing some wins? Or maybe we won't call them full out wins, but maybe some improvements when it comes to resiliency. Are there areas where you're seeing successes?
Um, yes, I think Jeff covered most of that. It's those same general topic areas, if
Yeah.
you will, right? With those same challenges. What we're seeing also is, again, in the healthcare context,
Yeah.
where we're seeing healthcare providers, um, call us, our call center, using AI agents. So instead of a human making a call to inquire about a client, and that creates a different level of risk. It's not necessarily a security risk. It does create a privacy risk. Um, how
Hmm.
could that translate to a security risk? With the amount of data about each one of us that's already breached and publicly
Right.
available.
Yeah.
Social engineering um, is not very difficult with the AI tools available on the black market to bad actors. Um, so we need to put in place technological checks, detection mechanisms, also some human training mechanisms to detect if it's actually a human person that we're interacting with on the phone. Because
Yeah.
I can tell where the human's calling from. I can verify with the provider, did you make a call here? And AI could be calling from anywhere in the world, and we wouldn't know. And so it creates those interesting, where we're not talking about data loss at scale. We're talking about one at a time because the call is one at a time. But it does create an environment where suddenly we're talking about trust. Suddenly the call center staff cannot trust who they're talking to, right?
Mm.
There are different ways to address it. We're working on it, and I'll be surprised if the federal government doesn't have the same issue for our call centers, because wait times are notoriously high for all of our call centers, regardless of which government entity you're in. So I don't blame the providers for trying to use an agent to save their
Yeah.
own time. I don't blame the staff when they're concerned. We just need to find a way to support that use in a way that's appropriate and that protects the client's interest. You will keep hearing me go back to and circle back to that protecting the client's interest because that is our true north. We have to keep that front and center.
Yeah. Makes a whole lot of sense to me. Wait time is very high. Yes. Wait time at call centers is
And it's the
high.
same.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead,
It's
Jennifer.
the same for government. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
Um, whether it just depends on the agencies. There are several forward-facing agencies like the Veterans Affairs Administration and Small Business Administration. You have HUD. But then you have organizations that don't really have customer facing like the NRC, NRC. So it really just depends. I did some work in the last couple of years on the Thrift Savings Plan. And that was one of the things that came out of that review was the high volume and the traffic of folks calling the help desk and calling the centers and the centers not being able to then solve the problems for that customers were calling into. So they created like a pipeline of people having to call back and be and wait in endless cycles and sometimes hours. So that is something that we are facing, but it really just depends on the agency and their service to the American people. It's just not all of us.
Yeah. I can't say I'm upset, not upset that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission doesn't it doesn't have a call center. That feels like a good idea for them. All right. So with the few minutes that we have left, Jeff, one of the things that I'd love to hear is if you have any examples of agencies, you don't have to name names by any means, or teams that you've found success by taking cloud-based recovery and AI-driven security and kind of smushing them together. Any use cases you want to share?
Well, that's what we do, obviously, at Veeam. And we have found agencies that have been very successful using AI-driven anomaly detection and indicators of compromise. Interestingly, a capability that we actually added a couple of years ago that continues to deliver is the ability to look at backup data and look for indicators of compromise in backups so that you don't have to affect production systems and you don't have to move data anywhere else because it's already sitting there. That's one win that AI has made in terms of security for many of our customers. The other big advantage that AI can help deliver is to determine through access patterns and through the types of data, the criticality of data, and make suggestions about how quickly you might want to restore this system versus that system and recover this system versus that system. I don't know, Vishal and Jennifer, what your experience has been. Jennifer, obviously you audit organizations for a living and publish audit guidelines, but I still find that agencies often don't have a really clear idea of sort of the business impact analysis side of the recovery equation. What are the systems I have to bring up first? It's often going to be identity-based systems so that everything else can come up after that, and how they prioritize that. And that's something that AI can help with. And we've seen organizations have success using it to sort of prioritize what the most critical data is and what the systems are that need to come up first.
Yeah. All right. Jennifer, I thought you were talking for a second, but I think you were just agreeing with
I was
Jeff.
agreeing and I said absolutely.
Okay. All right.
There you go.
Wonderful. All right. So I have a final question for all of you. And I've posed our third question to our audience on the poll that basically is asking, do you think AI will aid in threat detection in the future? And for the three of you, I also want you to peer into the future, but I'll give you a little more context for that. And Vishal, I'll start with you. If you look ahead a few years, and it is so hard right now to predict the future, not that it was ever easy, but with the pace of change, it is getting even harder. But is there an area that you think will be shifting, reshaping, changing about how government maybe approaches security and recovery in the future? And are there things that leaders should be doing now to kind of help prepare for that inevitability?
That's a great question.
Okay.
My crystal ball is kind of taking a break right now, so I'm going to wing it here. I'll answer it in two ways. One is around the inevitability of progress. Today, the progress is in terms of the AI tools, right? 20 years ago, 25 years ago, it was in the way of computerization, right? Some of us lived through that, and having gone through that, it will work. It will work. There are growing pains that will happen. What do the agencies need to keep an eye on? I would say trust. If somebody is doing something for you, unless you can trust that it is done right, it's not really making progress, right? And that trust comes with experience. It will build over time. But it also comes with setting up transparent processes and structures that allow that trust to build when things go wrong. Trust doesn't build because you only have successes. Trust builds when there are failures, and how you pick back up and move on from there. That's what builds trust. So I think as leaders in the agencies, we need to set up those structures, if you will, that the undergirding, if you will, that can help build that trust over time through the successes, through the failures, through the learnings of using these different tools in the different arenas, right? Be it security, be it recovery, be it customer service, be it call centers. Like the use cases will evolve over time as the technology gets better, and it will get better. But that's, from a government leadership perspective, that's where at least we are at.
Yeah. It's so interesting as you talk. about kind of the impacts of the AI technologies and the technologies as a whole on kind of the cultural aspects of the organization and then the trust in which they are creating. I've mentioned multiple times that I've got a 3-year-old, and the piece of advice my dad always gave me was there's no such thing as a perfect parent. You're not going to get everything right, but you are going to be setting them up for so much difficulty if you never admit that you were wrong in a situation, because they're not going to know that they were wrong. And he was like, that's how you build trust. And at a much more targeted and technical level, that's kind of what you're talking about here, is saying like, this worked, this didn't, this is why this didn't go in this way. And you're building that trust because no one's going to be perfect. No institution is ever going to be able to be. So if you pretend to be, that's where things can kind of sometimes go wrong. I really appreciate that. All right, Jennifer, peer into the future for me a little bit. What do you see happening and what can we do to prepare?
I don't know how I follow the trust. It was such a good answer, but it's because it's true. And I think thinking about AI and the technologies, and then I was looking at the chat, I'm multitasking
Yeah,
here, making sure that we
as
get
you
to their
should. Yep.
answers, thinking about how people's skills, they feel
Mhm.
like they're not going to be enough and they could be replaced. That's a real heartache at this point.
Yeah.
But for me, from my, cyber's perspective as well, one major shift in addition to that trust I see moving forward is to really enhance our continuous real-time decision making
Mm-hmm.
across the security and the recovery. Like we're always going to have to, be or be acknowledgeable of the security controls and the need to protect the data within these AI modeling efforts. And AI was going to play just a larger role in identifying and prioritizing our response efforts. And success is going to depend on our governance structures. It really goes back to the how we're managing the data. And most recently, GAO, we issued some work. I had some work on zero trust architecture, and there's the federal cybersecurity strategy. And it really emphasized the need for us to really look at areas that are surrounding that trust environment and really moving forward for our efforts to be more proactive with identity management and continuous monitoring and just clear accountability structures. Who is managing what, when, why, and where. And agencies are doing that now. We are starting to prepare by strengthening our data foundation. And that integration across the systems will help us in the future to really be better positioned to take advantage of this shift that's coming.
Mm-hmm. 100%. All right, Jeff, you get to have the last say here, but I will say we do have the results from our final poll. And when we asked, do you think AI will aid in threat detection in the future? Resounding was yes, in some capacity, some way, shape, or form. So, with that in mind, what's in your crystal ball, and what are some ways that we can kind of help prepare?
So what I'd say we can anticipate in the next few years, and this I think, especially the third item I want to mention, builds on what both Vishal and Jennifer have said. We're going to see AI having an outsized effect on real-time response, as Jennifer mentioned. So security through AI is going to be a trend that increases quite a bit. We are also, unfortunately, going to be needing security from AI used specifically by threat actors. Again, I was very struck by the NYU proof of concept last summer, ransomware 3.0, where they, in a lab environment, had basically LLMs identify data to steal it, move laterally through the environment, and execute an entire ransomware attack with no human involvement required. So security from offensive AI is going to be the second thing that I think we're going to see more of. And the third thing, as both Vishal and Jennifer have mentioned repeatedly, is securing our own internal uses of AI. So sort of security from not antagonistic AI, but from the AI that we're using to help us and to help our constituents doing things that we don't expect or making mistakes or exposing data. And of all of those three, I don't know which one to rank the highest, but I know it's going to be a real challenge to get all three of those right, probably particularly the last one, because as we rely on it more, making sure that it doesn't make mistakes, or to Vishal's point, that we recover well from mistakes that it does make, is going to be a challenge.
Yeah. All right. I lied because I think Vishal has something to add. So you get to have our last word.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to have the last word. I promise. I'm itching to add something to what Jennifer had said earlier about, governance. And I want to clarify, we started the AI Ethics Committee 3 years ago. We started the framework 3 years ago. We've had a data strategy in place for the past 6 years. And if we had not taken the time to develop a data strategy, to implement a good, robust data governance mechanism, we would not have been in a position to talk about how to govern AI.
Yeah.
And I think so, basics first, foundations first. You cannot contain the sprawl if you don't know where the sprawl is.
Yeah.
Right? You cannot detect security issues if you are not governing your data infrastructure to begin with, right? So there are plenty of opportunities that have nothing to do with AI, right? That agencies can start taking now to shore up and get better at governing their data assets, their data sprawl, improve the integrity of the data quality, the trustworthiness of the data assets they already have, before they start engaging with vendors trying to sell them the best things in sliced bread. So it's just one of those things.
Yeah. It is true. It all comes back down to the foundations, even in the world of AI. I want to thank the three of you for sharing your big brains with us today. Security is always a very integral and critical element of how the government operates, and obviously adding AI into the mix just makes it even more complicated. So I appreciate you all sharing your wisdom with us today. Just a quick reminder that we do have some additional learning opportunities available for you in the resource section, so make sure you check those out. There's a lot to unpack in this space, so the more you know, the better off we'll be. And like I said, we will be sending you a link to the on-demand version of this training, so look for that in your inboxes tomorrow. But on behalf of GovLoop and Veeam, I hope you enjoyed today's session. And as always, we really appreciate and value the work that you do. So thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us this afternoon. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you at our next training. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks all.